Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, everyone. Welcome to our PMI and the PMP exam, past, present, and future, with my awesome colleagues. Some of you were on the last one, and I appreciate you joining us for this again. Why don't we start with a few introductions? You already know us a little bit, but let's go to Mark first.
Okay, you want me to introduce myself? Sure. So I'm the old dude in the group, and so been involved with PMI for a long time since actually 1995. Got my PMP in 1995, version one, all 64 pages. We were working off the draft of version one at that time. Was uh, very involved with the Washington, D.C. PMI chapter, served on their board in a number of different positions over the past almost 25 years now. And then from 2009 to 2013 was the trustee of the DC chapter. My career was with HP, Hewlett Packard, technical background, starting out as a systems engineer, operating system specialist, and then moved into project management and program management in the mid 90s. Left HP in '07 and been teaching PMP classes since that time, and been teaching Agile ACP classes probably 5 years. I think it's about 5 years. So I've been an avid follower of all this, all things PMI, especially the PMP certification, then really familiar with the evolution from version one all the way through to where we are now, version six, and what we're hearing bits and pieces about version seven. Went and took an ATP class back at the beginning of December, just so I could see what the new materials were, what the new slides were going to be. And so if I decide I want to try to go update all my existing things and try to do classes as a non-RAP. So PMI is allowing that. They even said on the LinkedIn side, the official PMI REP LinkedIn site way back in, I think, March or April, Phil, I think they announced, the main guy announced that, yes, that as far as PMI is concerned, they would allow, they really couldn't prevent other people from doing classes, but they would allow those classes to provide the contact hours, the 35 contact hours. So I'm still kind of on the fence. I'm still trying to decide, do I want to do this? Keep moving forward, update all my materials. So right now I have like 550 slides in the PowerPoint slide deck. I've got probably 35 to 40 hours of an LMS, a learning management system with videos and quizzes. So it's an immense amount of work that is going to be needed to update everything. And do I want to do it? And so this ATP class had almost 700 slides in their slide deck. And then they told all the students in the class that they really needed to spend another 2 weeks. They said, absolutely do not go take the test right after finishing this class, because a lot of companies would advise that to students. It's best just use it or lose it. Go take this test right away after finishing a class. And so now the ATPs, people doing this, they're advising people, no, take at least 2 weeks. And I think they said even more than that, it's going to take that time to go through all these extra things to get ready to take the new test starting on the 2nd, January 2nd.
Wow. Well, that's a long discussion that we'll have
Yeah,
to
it
have
is.
again, Mark. That's
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
yeah, it
So,
is.
all the work that you've done over the past number of years, it just
Yes,
seems to have
gone by the
gone,
wayside.
yeah, very.
Yeah.
And the
Phil, you
question,
probably, Phil, you probably did the same thing. I put in seriously about 2,000 hours of work in 2017, updating everything for version six at the time. And so I'm not happy. I'm not a happy camper to be facing this all again sooner than their normal. Normally they wait for about 4 years to release a new PMBOK guide.
right?
Normally they also wait 4 years for coming out with a new role delineation study, or which is also called the examination content outline. And so now they updated the ECO, or examination content outline, last summer. They updated that. And the new test is really more based on that. So they're shifting focus. They're moving away. They're diminishing the importance of the PMBOK guide and shifting focus to this ECO with its 3 domains. So people, process, and business. And then the company that they outsourced everything to for the ATP classes, the materials, a company called Logical Operations is doing all their new stuff.
Do
So
you think they are logical, Mark? Shouldn't
no,
we
no,
give them a
Mike,
new name? Shouldn't we give
not
them a new
politically
name?
correct. I call them illogical
That's
operations.
the right name. Because the little that I saw of what they did was so it just was bad. I mean,
Lots of
you
mistakes.
could give a student this project to update, and they would do a better job. A student.
Well,
I've laughed with some of my other PMP instructors that I work with. I said, these people couldn't pass the exam today.
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
it may actually present an opportunity for small companies
Right.
that don't decide to be ATPs, because it sounds like if you update your material, it'll probably be better.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm
That's
pretty
what it seems like.
confident I can do a much higher quality job and have much better training, but do I want to do it? Because it's still, I'm going to have to cover a lot more material. And can I, can you really fit that in a 4-day class? I was thinking, oh my goodness, these poor other students in this class, I can't imagine how they're following along everything. The instructor was very good, but I was wondering, how can these people follow him unless they are already PMPs,
Right?
and unless they are already pretty experienced with Agile and Scrum, because he's just throwing out term after term and stuff and not laying the foundation and just bouncing between topics and knowledge areas, processes. And I mean, it was spaghetti code, we used to call it.
Wow. Well, let's go to our next awesome colleague here. Susan, want to give us an introduction?
Sure. So actually, I remember when Mark and I first met each other years ago, we kind of looked at each other's resumes and we said, wow, there's a lot of similarity there. I have a few gray hairs, which I mask,
Not close.
fortunately, due to products, but not quite as many as Mark, even if I didn't color them. But I've been around for a while myself. I may not look like it. I guess that's a good thing, actually. So my background, I guess I got my PMP cert about 10 years after Mark, 2006, and it was actually the 3rd edition. After that, I got my RMP, PMI RMP, which is a risk management professional, and then also the ACP, Agile Certified Practitioner. I think I got that right. I have like 15 certifications, so
Oh, wow.
it does become crazy after a while. He's listed, Phil's listed a few of them here. I have 9 Agile certs, and I think I have maybe 4 or 5 risk certs. So that's that. My background is engineering, mechanical engineering, and the MSEM is a master's in engineering management. So I would say that's kind of still where my passion is. I love bridges, I love cars, planes. But I got into project management after getting into software development. I'm a bit of an accidental project manager. I was working as an engineer, started working on a software project where we're implementing a document management system for all of our drawings. So I actually am old enough that we had like the drawing bins with the Mylar. I don't know if anybody in engineering remembers those days where you actually like draw on the Mylar and would make copies. So I was actually around as we started to digitize that. And so I helped with this major software project, and I really enjoyed it. And there's a lot of good opportunities in IT. So I started doing software development. So a lot of that, and leading software development projects. I went from being a business analyst to a project and program manager. I've done a lot of work in telecom, software development, both private sector and for the federal government. I've spent probably about 2 decades doing work in the federal government, which has been really great. Some very massive projects, which is very exciting. Back in 2010, I decided to start my own consulting business after doing work with a bunch of consultants in the DC area. And when I did that, I started doing some teaching also. And I had done training for products that I had developed and led, but I started doing some more focused training on project management, risk management, and Agile. And so I now am a author, and actually Mark and I co-authored a book just this year. And I also speak, I do consulting and training. I'm a professor at 3 universities, Post University in Connecticut, Montclair State University in New Jersey, and University of Virginia, of course, in Virginia. And I teach risk and Agile in those locations. So those are my areas of subject matter expertise. And I don't know, I love to help people further themselves professionally so they can improve their life. And, you know, project management is something that I've used to have huge successes, help my customers have huge successes. And so I really enjoy teaching it. And I am happy to be a part of this conversation because I think it's really important for everyone.
Thank you very much, Susan. And I think that about wraps it up because most of you may have already seen me on social media. I don't want to bore you. It's going to be a very quick introduction for me because I actually know a lot of the folks on the call. So my name is Phil Akinwale. I've been a PMP since '05, 10 years after Mark got certified. So I often say I'm a schoolboy. Mark is the boss. He tells us what to do. He gives us the points to talk to. And that's just the end of the story. By the time I got into this, Mark had already gotten to his 3rd PMBOK guide. Do you have your PMBOK guide to hand? That
Yeah, hold on a
PMBOK guide we
second.
showed last time?
You want you want that draft of version 1 again?
Yeah, that draft. Why
Okay.
don't you get it, Mark?
So
Let's
Phil,
take a look at that
Hold
draft.
on a
you and I,
second.
I think we're on the same edition, and we were about a year apart. So
Yeah, exactly.
that
Mark,
was actually, to be honest, it was just before the huge craze. Like a lot of people didn't even know what it was. And then within that year or
oh my
two,
God.
oh my gosh, look at how thin it is.
That's 60. This is the draft of version 1 that came out
Wow.
in 1994, and that's what I worked off of to prepare for the exam. And as we said, I don't know, we got some new people on this time, but the
Oh my goodness.
exam was
But
actually longer. It was an all-day exam. There
it's
were only 8.
interesting, Mark, because
What's that?
that logo, I have never seen that logo before. That's an old
Uh,
logo, even older than the
Yeah.
one they just changed.
But there's actually something that preceded this. So
Oh
I
my
think
gosh.
this came out in 87. Yeah, this came out in 87. I don't know if you can see that. So they
Wow.
actually called this the PMBOK. So they made a mistake and they called this the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge. Well, that can't be a body of knowledge. The body of knowledge is the universe of literature. Every book under the sun connected to risk, quality, scheduling, you name it. And so then they quickly realized the error of their ways. And they ever since that time, so everything that came out later, like that draft of version 1, was called the guide to the PMBOK. Well,
Wow.
and starting off my
There's our,
classes, you probably do the same thing, both of you.
there's our
Both,
6th edition.
yeah, yeah.
756 pages, including the indices and appendices and all that. And
And then you have
when I
to
went to
add
pick it
on.
up, my arm almost got hurt. So
And that's not it all, Susan, because you got to add on the Agile Practice Guide, another
I
167 pages. And
yep.
guess what? Now with the new test in January, they're throwing new concepts in Agile and even outside the PMBOK guide. They're throwing new stuff into it too. So you're going to have to know the Agile Practice Guide does not mention any of the Agile estimating techniques. So it does not
Yep.
mention planning poker or t-shirt sizing or anything like that.
Nope.
So for the new test starting January, they're going to need to know that and
Mm.
some other good stuff.
Wow.
Also, there's stuff in the new materials that are flat out inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
The project management plan that they're describing now has 2 more subsidiary plans that are not in the PMBOK. They've got a compliance management plan and an agile project plan. So Susan, what agilist ever talks about an agile project plan?
That that
not
sounds to
one
go
that's,
against the grain of Agile, isn't
Yeah.
it?
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Goodness.
notice that the Agile practice guide is thin, and the Scrum guide is even thinner. So that's supposed to be lean. We're supposed to be lean here. We're not supposed to take something simple and make it complex. I always tell people I'm good at making complex things simple. You'd be surprised if you think about it, how many people you work with that are good at taking simple things and making them complex. There's
Yeah.
a whole business in that. It's called consulting.
Well, the smartest professors we've ever had were brilliant people who could take very, very complex things and make them so simple. And then like 30 minutes later, an hour, you're trying to rethink it. Say, God, how did he do that? How did she do that? But I can't rethink it. And really brilliant people are good at going the other way.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So I'm going to round up my little intro here. So I got certified in '05, 10 years after Mark. I've trained various companies in project management. The moment PMI spat out my PMP cert, I started training my colleagues at Honeywell. Got about 50 of them certified. Worked for many other companies like Motorola, US Airways, now American. Did a little stint at GD. And then I found my dream job in a gaming company until the crash of 2008, 2009. And then I started reinventing myself and decided after 9 months without work, like many people say, Phil, I've not had a job for eons. Trust me, I know how that goes. I've had 18 months. If I add up throughout my career, 18 months without work. So I had to reinvent myself, and I thought, well, let me just do it full time because I'd already started doing stuff in Microsoft Project and a little bit of PMP training and worked with Skillsoft. And I know most of us on this call have worked for other training providers. So I just decided, let me make it official and go full time. But let's jump into what we talked about last time really quick. We talked about the PMI, the past of the PMI, how huge their footprint is. We went through the list of CEOs and where we are today, and we showed a little bit of a timeline. And then we talked about Mark's story is from 1995 till current. We talked about our thoughts for the future, which we're also going to talk about today, the thoughts about the so-called version 7, which we will be speaking about today. We shared thoughts with you. We showed this image of changes from the PMBOK guide 6th to 7th. And then we talked about the new so-called ECO and the new 5 modules in the so-called logical operations material. And then we show this image, how we're moving from the 5 process groups to these domains of people, process, business, and we shared thoughts about that. We also shared thoughts about PMI's change in direction, which we're going to amp up a little bit today. We talked about what the PMI certification should cover, and that takes us to today. Today, we're going to be starting off with this book that my awesome colleagues, Mark and Susan, have authored, and the book is Hybrid Project Management. And one of the key topics in the book is how Agile helps us solve 4 key risks. So right off the bat, I want you to know you can find this book on Amazon. If you just do an Amazon search, Hybrid Project Management, type in their names, you'll find the book. But in the book, they talk about these 4 key risks, which are rather interesting. So we're going to talk about the first risk. Mark, Susan, let's talk about the first risk.
I think in all the literature, most often projects fail because we don't do scope well. So the scope knowledge or the scope statement is not done well. It's vague, it's ambiguous. Acceptance criteria are for the deliverables are very poorly written. They're not SMART. And you guys all know what SMART is, right? One of their favorite acronyms: specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, time bound. And so if you go into your project with a very poorly written scope statement, vague, ambiguous scope statement, what's going to happen in validate scope? You're bringing in the customer to check out your deliverables. How's that going to go? What are they going to say? This isn't it, Mark. Sorry, buddy. This isn't what I was looking for. Weren't you listening? We've got to have these extra features. I absolutely have to have these extra features. And if my acceptance criteria was vague, poorly written, then guess what? I'm adding that in at my expense, and that leads to what we hate most, scope creep. and
then there's
probably a new project manager.
and then there's the thing where the customer asks you for something and you give them exactly what they asked for, but it wasn't what they needed because either what they needed changed or they weren't good at articulating it, which kind of plays off what Mark was saying. So, scope uncertainty, that thing will hurt you every time. If you're late, but you deliver what's needed, or if it costs too much and you deliver what's needed, those things maybe are okay. But if you're on time within budget and you deliver something that's not needed, that's pretty much useless. It's not survivable. I mean, nobody wants to pay too much and nobody wants it to come in late, but at least you got what you needed. So if scope's wrong, then that's not good. Really, really, really bad. But yet it is one of the things that's a biggest risk on most projects.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we go on to the second risk on the list? And this is risk number 2, allowing half-baked ideas to survive. So, want to talk about that?
Sure, you want me to start, Susan, or you
Yes.
can start. Either way, we can flip it around.
Okay, sure. So, half-baked ideas. So, this I think about this kind of falls on with the scope issues where it's not clearly defined what you want, or you get into something and then you feel like, well, we're already in it, so let's keep throwing money and resources at it, and you're not going back and seeing, is this still viable? Does this still make sense? Does it still add value to the customer? So a lot of times projects are started that if you actually evaluate it in the middle of the project, you would basically, your result of that evaluation would be, we shouldn't do this project, but you're already in it. Unfortunately, that happens a lot in the public sector projects because the way funds are allocated, contracts are put in place. So sort of once you pass that wicket and the project's good to go, people don't take a look at it again and decide, should we continue on with this or not? And so it ends up being throwing good money at bad. And to me, that's about not being in communication with your stakeholders throughout the project is what allows that to survive. And Mark, I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah, it can cause a company to fail. It's somebody's pet project, somebody's brainstorm. They think this is going to work, like oops, version 7 or something, the ATP program. They think this is going to work. And again, they don't do the, in developed charter, we're really testing, we're bringing in the business need, who needs what and why are we doing this? And typically the financial analysts, the senior managers, they're analyzing that business need using those good old financial selection techniques in the traditional world. So net present value, internal rate of return, payback period. And they try to make a decision. Should we go ahead with this business idea? Do we think we can succeed? Are we going to lose our shirt? Is this way too competitive marketplace? Is it too regulated? So on and so forth. And then a lot of companies, what Susan is saying, a lot of companies go ahead and authorize the project. So the charter comes out, the sponsor signs the charter, and they move forward. So it passes that initial test, but then they never ever come back and reanalyze that business case. And we should be doing that. We should be doing kill points as we move from phase to phase to phase, either using the selection techniques again, from phase to phase to phase. But Agile gives us something much, much better. We're doing things empirically. So at the end of every sprint, every iteration, we're producing something, so product increment, and they can see it. And as Doug DeCarlo says in a brilliant book, Extreme Project Management, so I'm going to steal his quote. His quote is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures. To be able to see something empirical, tangible is far better than using the analytical techniques or Monte Carlo and modeling and trying to forecast and project.
Absolutely.
Good points. Okay, Susan, do you have anything to add? Should we go to point 3?
Yeah, go to point 3.
All right. So point number 3 should be a fun one.
You're
And
probably
this is
amazed how we got it down to 4 risks.
Another thing here with these risks, there was a brilliant program manager who came to the DC chapter for a dinner meeting and spoke about a bunch of huge weapon systems. So he was a very high level DoD program manager, and he was speaking to us about the F-22, which was the most expensive fighter airplane ever built. And it was years behind schedule and billions of dollars over budget. And then he put up like another 9 weapon systems that were all the same thing. And he said, when projects fail, they fail at the very beginning. So these risks are the things we're talking about here. These 4 risks are things that start and hit us right at the very beginning.
Mark, you wanna start with this one, and then I will.
Okay, so there's a very good book on this topic by Michael Dobson, and so I'm again another presentation done at our chapter at a dinner meeting, and he said it's the case all the doggone time where you as project manager are not brought into the pre-sales part, and the salespeople and management approve this project, and they make promises. They make all these promises to their customer, and then it gets thrown over the fence to you. Catch, Mark, here you go. And you're thinking, oh my God. And so you got impossible constraints. You got an impossible schedule constraint, an impossible budget constraint. And you're wondering, what in the heck were they thinking of? You come and manage this. And so Michael Dobson did a great presentation. He talks about how by analyzing these constraints, if we think out of the box, we get very creative in analyzing these constraints. We often realize there were hidden assumptions in the constraints that we can do something about. And in thinking about this, and after being involved with Agile for a number of years, I'm thinking, hey, whoa, Agile even brings something a lot more to the table for dealing with the impossible constraints. And I think Jeff Sutherland in his book, Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time, I think he nails it. He hits it totally on the head. And he's basically saying, you do prioritization right off the bat. And he's talked about Medco. They bring in they've got this impossible schedule constraint to roll out some new automated robot pharmacies and get it done in a year. The CEO promises that to Wall Street, and he doesn't go ask the IT people, is this feasible? No, and so they put everything through their scheduling tool, Primavera, whatever it is, and they say, it looks like the best case is we can do this in 2 years. That's the critical path. We can do this in 2 years. And he says, that's not acceptable. Our stock will take such a hit. We'll all be out of a job. We'll all be looking for a new job. And so they're in desperate straits. They bring in him. So they bring in Jeff Sutherland and a bunch of other Scrum specialists. And Sutherland says to him, okay, bring me all of your requirements. So he goes to all these department heads, all these IT heads, and they bring the Scrum people all the requirements. Well, guess what? It's a stack of paper that is 3 or 4 feet tall. They pile it all up. It's just a stack of requirements and people. And then he says to them, okay, how much of this do you really need? How much of this is essential? So they write it all out onto story cards, and they put down their epics, their features, their stories onto these cards, and they do the affinity estimating or affinity diagrams. They paste them all over the walls, see what's analogous, what has affinity, and they end up very quickly, within a day or 2 days, you realize there's tremendous duplication and boilerplate, and they realize they only need half of that. And then he says, okay, let's go after that half. Let's do prioritization. Let's figure out what is that 20% of all this that's going to meet 80% of your need. And they go after that. And guess what? They end up rolling out the new updated applications and robotic technologies that they needed and met the CEO's constraint.
Well, I mean, they say that in traditional project management, often you get 80% of what you asked for. The problem is you don't know which 20% you're not getting. So in Agile, we say, okay, well, we figure at the end you're going to get 80% of what you need. Why not give you the 80% that matters the most? And actually not what you need, what you want. We'll say 80% of what you ask for originally is what you're going to get. So in Agile, we're going to give you the 80% that you actually need, that's most valuable to you. And how do we do that? We do it because we're working on it by prioritization. In traditional project management, the assumption is you want all 100%. So we plan to deliver all 100%. Do we deliver all 100%? Usually not, because something changes and risks show up and we have cost impacts and schedule impacts and scope impacts because of those risks. So we end up giving you 80%. It's just maybe not the 80% that was most important. So when there is a lot of risk with delivering on all of the scope, that's why in those circumstances, Agile is a better strategy, because you're going to get the 80% most important to you.
It's a very good point, and I want to give a shout out to some of our other viewers. We haven't forgotten you. We have some viewers on YouTube. We got a few chats in from Personal Lean Style. Kamal says, Mark, you mean the business case should be reanalyzed in every phase to check if it's still viable? Absolutely. Right, Mark?
Yep.
Those are kill points, definitely. And again, Agile gives you, I think, we're doing those kill points really much more quickly. There are many more feedback loops and much more frequent feedback loops where we're like at the end, at least at minimum, at the end of every iteration sprint, we're bringing in the product owner to review things. So they don't like it, doesn't meet their needs, it doesn't have value, change it or kill it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're doing much more frequent kill points. And again, it's empirical. They're seeing it, they can touch it, they can play with it.
And you know, that's where PMI is missing a lot of value that Agile brings. It's amazing that even though they bought one of the Agile companies, the Discipline Agile umbrella, that they couldn't practice Agile effectively in all of these rollouts. There's nothing like a kill point. Everything has to be done. It's pedal to metal. There's no customer collaboration over negotiation. They just throw in everything that they plan to do in and forcing it down. But let's hold off for that thought. It's coming. It's coming. We're going to go to point number 4 before we explode on this one. So let's go to point number 4. Poor communications.
Well, everybody knows that communication is key for projects. And what's nice in Agile, and I will say this, we're not, I have a term, scrumdimentalist, people who say, go Scrum or go home. So Mark and I are not of that mindset. We believe Agile is a tool that should be used when appropriate, and traditional project management is also a great tool, and we shouldn't get rid of that just because we have this new, awesome, cool thing, which actually isn't that new. Agile is back in the 90s, which is actually quite old now, which is scary for me to say. But communication, everybody knows communication is really critical for projects. The thing in Agile is we have a lot more communication, more frequently, a higher level of transparency. We have daily stand-ups where even though the customer does not speak at them, they're allowed to stand there and listen. We have constant reporting, real-time reporting, instead of waiting till the week's over, the quarter's over, the month's over to get a report. We do reporting all the time. So communication is a key part of things. We're communicating with the customer when we plan for the iteration. We're communicating with them when we review the iteration. Like Mark's saying, we're having this constant communication and feedback. All about communication. If you don't want to communicate with your customer frequently, I do not recommend using an Agile approach. It's not going to work.
Also, we're presenting information to them in a way that's much more digestible and understandable. How many customers, how many senior managers are going to understand an S curve on your dashboard with all the earned value variables, plotting all that out? Do they have any clue to what that really means? And so we say that the traditional status reports, dashboard reports, and things like that are high tech and low touch. And so many things in Agile on the information radiator are the opposite. So they are high touch and low tech, anybody's going to be able to understand what a burn down chart is, and they're going to be able to forecast from it. It's pretty obvious. You can see your trend and how you're tracking and when you're going to finish. Same thing with a Kanban board, very
Yeah.
easy, understandable, very, very usable. Lots of these things.
Absolutely. So that's part of that transparency and communication. And I know from being both a developer and a project leader, project manager, that the one thing I don't like is somebody coming to my office, or in this case, emailing or messaging me, asking me for a status. I'd rather just post it on a board and here, you want to know the latest status? Go look at the board. Because every time somebody stops and asks you a question, you got to stop what you're doing. And it's not conducive to getting the work done. So it's really important that the communication be transparent and in real time, but that doesn't mean that you're constantly talking to people. Instead, you're constantly providing them feedback, update, and like you said, high touch, low tech.
Right.
So,
and what do senior managers hate most? Surprises.
Not knowing, yeah, surprises.
Surprises. So in Agile, with the information radiator, something that's very understandable, far more frequent communications, we're mitigating that risk and dealing with that problem. To me, in my personal experience in the past, from project management from the early 90s, or probably even before then, I never ever saw a project that was in deep trouble that didn't have communications problems. There were always serious communication problems. What do we have right now, Phil, with PMI?
Oh, don't get me started, Mark.
Yes,
so when we talk about
turn the crank here.
communications, Mark and Susan, you can see how we are communicating amongst ourselves and to people, but we're not just communicating a one-track, agenda. We are collaborating as we're communicating. Now, the thing about PMI, when they look at us, their
Right.
stakeholders, they tend to see us as peons. Let's just be honest,
Right.
because if they didn't see us as peons, there would be an exchange, the sender-receiver model. You send the message, the receiver, there is nothing from us, the receivers.
Yeah.
In fact, it's cut off. It's cut off.
Ask us if we liked any of this at all.
It would have been real easy to send a survey. They send surveys all the time. I vote. I've been voting in elections since PMI elections since probably 2006. So it's really easy. Send a survey. I know not everybody answers them, but they probably get 30-40% answer, especially with something like this. They may even get 70% answer, to be honest with you. So something this critical, but yeah, it's like somebody got an idea and they said, we're going to do this and we don't really care how it's received. It's probably the best model of what not to do when it comes to stakeholder management and communication, which is very odd because I've had more than a few colleagues of mine say, all those processes and best practices that you guys talk about, maybe you could use those. So it's like very odd.
This is why I appreciate Mark and Susan being here, because honestly, sometimes it's just better I keep quiet, because whenever I speak, it just appears as though I'm against the PMI, but I'm not. You see, we are not against the PMI. We are the PMI. This is what the folks in headquarters forget. And they do not practice communication very well. It's a one-way street. It's almost like dictatorship, because Mark, you had a lot of comments on the 7th edition. I had a lot of comments on the 7th edition. It's like a lot of those comments have just been swept under the rug. And it's like, we're going full steam ahead. We don't care whatever you folks have to say about it. This is our agenda. Your peons, pedal to metal. But let's forget that. Let's go to our presentation, because there's some other points that are probably more logical and more coherent than my babble right now. So before I start babbling, let's go to our presentation. So you said, well, the PMI has violated best practices in handling several of these, but especially, let's talk about this half-baked idea, because we're about to go off on this ridiculousness here. So moving forward with the new ATP program, let's talk about that for a quick second. Where is the sense in having 2,000 plus committed men, women on the ground being your marketing empire? Where's the sense in taking that 2,000 people that were REPs, those entities, and hacking that away to a mere 300, if that? you've basically gotten rid of your marketing arm, and you
Not
don't
only
care,
that,
and you don't even see.
not only that, they've put these chapters in a bad situation. One of my colleagues, I'm not going to say what chapter, one of my colleagues is in charge of the professional development program, and the PMP cert, they have been providing that for years. It's an opportunity for the chapter to make money. Chapters need to make money because
Yeah.
they do events, they provide programs, including opportunities for people to find jobs, do job searches, network, connect with other people. They charge very minimal fees. Most chapters fees are like $20 or $30. They can't operate an organization based on that. And these chapters may only have a few thousand people in them. So having PMP training has been a key part for them.
Right.
And now they're not able to do that unless they're
Right.
an ATP. Well, they're not providing enough training annually to make it, to justify that. So why they would create a program that has such negative impact on the chapters, which to
Right.
me is a marketing arm, it's a sales arm, it's a support arm. I mean,
It's
to
our
me,
grassroots.
I have such affinity for the chapters that I've belonged to, the chapters I've worked with. I have such happy things to say about them, and the fact that something could be done at the national level that disregards the chapters, which to me, like you said, Phil, we are the Project Management Institute. The members are not, it's not just the leadership, it's not just the organization, but the members really make it up, because all the wonderful things I've experienced have been at the chapter level, conferences and symposiums and all these things that they provide that are just such huge opportunities for people to find employment, to further their
Right.
education.
Right.
It's crazy.
And most of that was being done on a volunteer basis.
Yep.
People were giving up a lot of time. All the presenters and amazing presenters we brought into the DC chapter over the 25 years. Sometimes we brought in a very VIP level person, and we paid their travel expenses to bring them up to speak. We brought up the executive vice president of the Panama Canal expansion project,
Wow.
Jorge Quijano. So I think it's $4.5 billion project that went on over 4 or 5 years. An amazing presentation. So we flew him up, and he stayed overnight, but that was it. He didn't get any honorarium, or he didn't get paid $10,000, $20,000 or anything like that to speak. And almost all the chapters too, as Susan was saying, doing PMP prep classes was a big part of their mission. They said, this is our mission in life, to promote project management, kind of promote that was the only certification from PMI when I got started. And so it was to promote the PMP, kind of all things PMI, and PMI is a nonprofit, supposed to be a nonprofit. I think I'm not sure if that's really justified anymore. I think they're kind of shifting gears and trying to go a different direction. But anywho, yeah, you're right. I think out of all the chapters, I think only 3 have decided to try to become ATPs.
Wow. I mean, let's talk about the fees. They're quite up there. They're steep. It's not chicken change. I mean, before it used to be like $1.5 grand-ish, thereabouts. But now with this ATP thing, it's hiked towards the tens, if not. And they're also looking for additional,
right?
I don't know, I'll call it the Shylock fee, because Shylock wanted his pound of flesh. They want their pound of flesh for everyone you train. I mean,
$100 a student in the class.
It's ridiculous.
And those fees depend on where your organization is headquartered. So that makes it really difficult for online training, which, by the way, we're all doing online training right now. So if you live in a third world country, or you have an organization in a third world country, and you say the material is coming from there, you get it at 1/3 of the price of somebody in the US. And although that may seem fair to that country, what's not fair is I actually teach for some global organizations. They can have everything come out of an office in Mexico City, even if they're teaching in New York City. And that gives a competitive advantage to them over the small business that's teaching in New York City that has to charge the $100 per student. So it pretty much drives, the price point drives people, small businesses, out of online teaching. because they're competing with other countries that can do it for cheaper. And I mean, nowadays, I mean, what are these borders anyway? I mean, I've worked with people in India, I've worked with people in Mexico, I work with people in Europe. We're not from a delivery perspective, you know, we can easily do that now. And so that was kind of not well thought out. I mean,
It was not, Susan. And on our group, the REP group, by the way, Mark, which is shutting down today, because
Right.
Mark and I in that group, I don't know if you've had inkling into that, Susan, but we've got a group
yes.
of REPs. And the REP group, I mean, when we shared that on the REP group, we got a chat saying, oh, wow, yeah, we need to look into that. So obviously talking about half-baked ideas, very, very poorly thought out. And I know a lot of folks are learning about this for the first time. They don't even know about the change from the REP program to the ATP program. But let's talk about point number 2, discarding or minimizing the current framework of 10 knowledge areas and 5 process groups in favor of 3 ECO domains. Is this busy work or is this absolutely needed, do you think?
I think they should have, if they were going to make major changes, they should have reduced the amount of inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques.
Yes.
If you want to make a major change. So the latest Scrum guide, as a comparison, came out. It's shorter than the previous one. My immediate thought was, wow, they really worked hard on that. You know what's difficult is to make something simple, to simplify. It's easy to just keep stacking things up. I wish they had created some more leanness. The knowledge areas, I'll be honest with you, stakeholder management, when they finally came out with that, I think it was the 4th or 5th edition, I was like, oh, thank God, because I'm trying to explain to students what it is that's not really communication and not really human resource management that you really need to do to be successful, and that's stakeholder management. So to me, those knowledge areas, I have a horrible memory. I have never memorized the 10 of them, but I just know them because I think about what are all the things I care about. So to me, to get rid of them makes no sense at all, because it just natural. I mean, the process groups, when I think about how a project works, I don't care, you know, you talk about these domains, people, process, and business. That's great, but that's not how a project works. That's just those are just buckets of things. But that doesn't teach people. You need to know process to get a project to work. Even in Agile, you have initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, closing. It's just in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 1 week. So it's crazy to me to get rid of something that's actually valuable. And I think Mark and I have talked about this and say, you know, no matter what the PMBOK guide says, we're going to continue to manage projects in a way that works. I'm going to continue to manage my projects that way because that's what works.
And your customer is going to demand it also. So I've never been in a meeting with a customer, with a senior manager, and we're talking in the beginning of the project. So maybe it just got authorized. We've just finished developed charter. We're moving into the, you know, we had the kickoff meeting and we're moving past the kickoff meeting. What are they always going to ask you? Hey, Mark, when are you going to be done? Hey, Mark, how much is this going to cost? And what are you going to really give me for this $1 million or 500,000? You know, what am I getting and when am I going to get it? And even if you're in Agile, where we're not making detailed promises on what we're going to do in 6-9 months, a year, and we're exploring and kind of playing things by ear a bit, we're still focused on, you know, we're telling them we're going after that 20% of the requirements, you know, and here's your high level requirements. And we think we can get these 20% of the requirements out in our first iterations. And we're going to let you kick the tires. You're going to get to see it and feel it and touch it and such, and find out what has value, find out what doesn't. So I think Agile still works very well within the 10 knowledge areas. And about the 5 process groups, what is the precursor? What is the framework, the model of the 5 process groups? Where does that come to us from? The Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Oh, the Demings.
Which is
Demings
the
Plan, Do, Check, Act. Yeah.
Which is the heart and soul of every major quality methodology. They aren't giving that up. That's not going away.
Yep. Now, talking about reinventing the wheel, let's take a look at this Agile practice guide, because a lot of people don't realize what you just said, what you and Susan just said about the knowledge areas. Projects still need to be put through, whether it's the 5 process groups. We just don't call it that in Agile. Oh, the knowledge areas, they're present. Go to page 91 of the Agile practice guide. What do you see? You see a correlation. It says application of Agile in PMBOK guide knowledge areas. A lot of people are missing this. So when PMI is coming out with this new lofty 7th edition framework, and they're just making everything so confused, people don't even know whether on the 2nd of January they're going to be using the 6th edition or the 7th edition. They got no clue where this thing is going. You know that this is definitely a half-baked idea, and they've been forcing it on us. But I think I'm going to go with what Mark and Susan have said. I will not manage my projects in a crazy, disoriented way. I will use the 5 process groups. I will use the 10 knowledge areas. And this is just a call to all project managers to use that awesome brain of yours to rationalize it for yourself. Don't just take stuff from the office of the PMI and say, oh, they said this is a 7th edition framework. Don't do that. Think about your company. What are you guys using currently? Is it working for you? Does it make sense to take a lackluster bag of garbage that has been thrown on you and use that to manage your projects? Of course not. So you got to think about what works for you. And honestly, I would never leave the 5 process groups, because it's like fighting against gravity, the laws of physics.
Agree. Agree. And what I always say, even when people are looking at trying to implement further, like the processes in the PMBOK guide, I always say, is what you're doing working? You know, I'm a results person. So if what you're doing is working, keep doing that. And the same thing with traditional versus Agile. If you're using traditional and that's working and your projects are meeting their objectives, they're being done on time, within scope, within your budget, then keep doing that. If you have projects that are not doing that, then consider, do I want to use an Agile approach? How do I want to do this? Or do I want to better follow the PMBOK guide? Maybe my product quality is poor. Well, why don't I go look at the quality management section and look at what the best practices are? So to me, it's all about results. And I'm not going to say there isn't something in the 7th edition that's going to be valuable. I'm sure there will be, but I'm not going to throw out everything that I've ever learned and known for that. That doesn't make sense. Also, the project management body of knowledge is much larger than anything PMI will ever write. That's why it's called the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or the PMBOK guide. It's not a full and complete encyclopedia of things. It's highlights. So we need to keep that in mind. And the other thing I have to say is that, you know, I'm a mechanical engineer by education, and if you look at how houses are built, the distance between joists, things like that, those things haven't changed very much recently, and neither has electrical engineering, and as far as like in houses and construction. Project management is very new compared to those fields. It's still changing, and I think that we as practitioners get to choose and decide what project management is. That's not something people are going to tell us. It's something that we get to decide.
Absolutely, Susan. I just want to anchor onto that, because we all know this Stacy complexity model. So let's take a look at this. This is what a lot of people fail to realize, like the Scrum and Agile zealots, which we're not, right? We're huge proponents of Agile and Scrum, but we're not an all or nothing type mindset people. In this Stacy complexity model, if you take a closer look, you can see that we are always going to have some projects that fall into close to certainty in terms of the agreement on requirements, close to agreement, right? We're always going to have some simple projects, and we can use a predictive method.
Yeah.
But we're going to have some that fall into the anarchy zone, and it's okay to use whatever you see fit. There's going to be a trajectory or a continuum, let's say, between here and here, like that way. There's going to be a continuum, and you can use any method that fits your fancy, that fits what you're working on. So to take the 5 process groups and the 10 knowledge areas and say they're no longer relevant, and this is what we're going to use in the 7th edition as a framework, that's the thing I don't like. And I agree with Susan. There's a lot of great stuff that could be gleaned from the 7th edition that I saw in the works, one of which is servant leadership, right? That would have been a nice addition. But to take out the baby with the bathwater. That's the problem. That's what we are against. And we don't believe that it's here is one size fits all. No project is going to ever be a one size fits all. And that's why the way they had it broken into the sixth edition and this, just, keeping them as two distinct publications was not a bad idea. So I don't know where they're going with this, to be honest. I don't
I
know.
think,
It's also a bit confusing because the ACP still exists, but they're focusing on
yeah,
discipline agile. And so it's caused a lot of confusion. A lot of people have asked me, well, if agile is going to be part of the PMP cert
right.
and they're taking on discipline agile, where does that put ACP? And I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard any inklings that they're going
Right.
to get rid of it, but
I
it
don't know.
concerns me because it's one of my favorite certs.
Right.
It's great.
They've thrown a lot of other people overboard. So, but there's over 30,000 certified ACP certified project managers today. It's one of their fastest growing certifications. So,
Yeah, talk about shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, or just
so
talk about carrying coal to Newcastle. Talk about just the white elephant project that didn't even need to be. I mean, I don't understand these folks. Let's talk about some of these disasters, Mark, because you're very familiar with these. Run us through.
well, I didn't know you wanted me to talk. I would have some notes on these things, but
Well, let's
before
just
we get
touch
to
on
that,
them tiny bit.
if I could, before we get to this, you're asking where are they going with all this?
Yes.
And we're all trying to read the tea leaves right now. We don't, there's some uncertainty. So on your chart that you were just showing us, and then we're somewhere in the middle there,
Yeah.
moving towards oops chaos. But I believe that they are deciding to diminish the importance of the PMBOK guide.
Mm,
So I believe that, so version 7 is supposed to come out in Q1 or Q2 of 2021. So I'm guessing Q2. So probably, before, what's that, before June or by that time. But I don't think that's, normally when they come out with a new PMBOK guide, that is going to cause a huge change in the exam. But I think maybe it won't this time. I think they might come out with version 7 and say May or June, but they are not going to change the ECO, the role delineation study, the ECO. They just updated that last summer. So that's going to stay static, I believe, for probably 4 years. And I believe they've shifted focus, and the test is going to be based off that ECO. So people, process, and business. But it gets a little more complicated than that because the ATP materials, so what logical operations is put together, is kind of a translation of those 3 domains into 5 modules that you put up a little while ago. And then within these 5 modules, there are enablers. What the heck does that mean? So kind of tools. There's enablers, deliverables, and tools. And it's just all over the map. It's basically, for me in the course, it was kind of gobbledygook. And that's something that's not memorable, not intuitive, not part of the lexicon of normal project management, not stuff that we use. And a lot of it, it's a lot of fluff too. It's as if, I think the instructor said that this is the first ECO that they got people outside of the project management community to help write it, and they went to a lot of HR people, and boy, ding 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 ding, the light bulb. Oh, that's
I
why.
just said, oh, I had no idea, but that explains a lot.
It does. And so there's a lot more. And so there's a lot more on Agile, because Agile is focusing more on, giving us some great things, great tools for improving communications, improving collaboration, prioritization, people skills and stuff. But there's a lot more on the people side. It's one of the craziest things, but they're making the assumption in a lot of the materials that you're in kind of a small internal software, or knowledge work type project internal. And the key focus is managing your team and kind of, empowering the team, kind of agile concepts, servant leadership, theory Y type management. No, no, wait a minute, PMI. This certification, the PMBOK guide, was always supposed to be a framework that supported projects in all industries, in under any contract type. Construction people are not going to, this is not very relevant for, building a huge office building or the
Doesn't sound
Panama Canal.
scalable either. Doesn't
Yeah,
what you're saying?
right,
Large corporations aren't going to be able
right,
to do that. I have a
right.
question, Mark. What if you kept the material you have but augmented it?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Could somebody still pass the exam? I mean, I actually think the way it's organized is a better way to teach it.
Yeah,
Could you
it's much more intuitive. It's
still
far
teach the
easy to,
exam content outline, but use the
yeah,
structure that we previously have used? I mean, why does it matter as long as it's a good way of teaching and
yeah.
people are going to pass the exam?
I think it's going to be much more understandable. I can delete. So they are de-emphasizing also the ITTO. So the inputs, the tools and techniques, and the outputs. So in version 6, there's, if you count all the little bullets underneath things like data gathering techniques, data representation techniques, data analysis, if you delete, and some of those have like 30, 40 bullets underneath them. And I don't know. So if you count all those bullets with those tools and techniques and some of the inputs too, it's over 1,400 ITTO in version 6. And that was the main problem in version 6. It just blew people away. Said, how in the heck do you expect me to absorb that, assimilate that, and know what goes where, when am I, what process am I doing? Resource leveling? Was it resource estimating, or was it estimate resources? No, it was develop schedule. So you did need to, you used to have to know that. So that's going away. You're not going to have to know that. But the new stuff, these 5 modules that you were just showing us a second ago, Phil, they're all filled with kind of their own bullets. So every one of these have like 10, 12, 15 bullets underneath them that are enablers, that are kind of like tools. They say they're examples, but it's not intuitive. You're never going to remember them, to
Yeah.
me. Now I'm getting old, so maybe it's just me, but
No, I agree.
they're not memorable. They're not intuitive. It's oops, sorry. It's gobbledygook.
It does. When I look at them now and I hear what you said about HR, it does
Yes.
seem to have that flavor. And I'm not opposed to that. I mean, I think actually what makes a project successful is basically a project manager having those soft skills. So I agree that they should be emphasized. I think they're very important, but you need to know how to use tools. You need to know the processes, how they work together, how does risk management affect quality, and how does quality get reported from a reporting perspective, from performance in the project, all those things. That this is, I think project management is a objective profession. Okay. I teach university students, and one of the things they have a challenge with is that there actually can be a wrong answer. So I'm teaching them best practices, and they write a paper and they don't include best practices, so they got it wrong. And they're like, but I wrote a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, okay, this isn't subjective. There are best practices that work, and there are things that don't work. And so if you don't know the best practices, you're basically going to be reinventing the wheel. And why should you do that? I mean, people have been doing project management since the Egyptian pyramids. And I don't know that they were using the PMBOK guide, but they probably had some initiating and planning. I'll tell you that. I don't think they just rolled up their sleeves and started putting together the pyramids. I think there was a plan. So I think process is really important, and yes, soft skills are important, but it just, that when I look at those 5 things, I just see soft skills. I don't see process. And one of the things broken when I go to different clients is people not following best practices, not following processes,
Yep.
just being willy-nilly about it, in which case you have some good leaders who can actually get a project through and be successful, but people who don't know how to don't end up being successful. And that's where you need a process for.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in the class that I took, compared to most PMP prep classes today, which most companies probably have something like 500, 550 slides in there for a 4-day class. That's what they have in the existing slide deck. So now to cover, put that other slide back up, Phil, a second, for these 5 modules, this company, and every ATP has to use the same slide deck. They all have to use the logical operations, course materials, and slide deck. So it's about 700 slides to cover these 5 modules. And again, just and there's so much duplication, and they're just bouncing between kind of processes, and existing knowledge areas are just bouncing back and forth between them. And then at the end of the class, or during the class, the instructor says to the students, well, you still have to know how to do network diagramming.
But wait, there's more.
So we did not cover network diagramming.
And that's such a sin. That's such a sin, because covering that is really important for people to do, like to see you do it and ask questions, because I get the most questions on that, on network diagrams, PERT, and earned value. And if they're not,
we did not do earned value. We did not do network diagramming. There was no math, 0. They had 0, and I like math, so oops, sorry. There was no math. And but they said to the students, you need to spend, after this 4 days of class, you need to go spend another 2 weeks going through more materials, more backup materials, and in the backup materials, we're going to cover network diagramming and stuff.
Well, that's just honestly, from a teaching perspective. I mean, I have many years of math education, including engineering degree and graduate degree in engineering management. And if there's one thing you're going to teach in the classroom with the instructor, it should be math. Because it's something that conceptually people don't necessarily get if you explain it in a certain way. And so people ask questions, then you explain it in a different way until they finally grasp it. And reading that in a book, I mean, unless you're a mathematical mind, reading math in a book is not getting you there. I mean, I'm sure even elementary school education will tell you right now that Zoom classes and reading material is probably not cutting it in math. Okay, unless you got a whiteboard and you can share the whiteboard with the student. Remember, we all used to go up to the chalkboard and do the math. There's a reason. So math is only learned, in my opinion, when you do it. You actually have to kinesthetically do it.
Yes.
So some of those soft skills you can read about, servant leadership, that's fine, but you're not going to read about math and get it. So I think that's a huge failing in my perspective.
Absolutely. I totally agree with everything you've said, both Mark and Susan, and really drumming on these modules that Susan said is devoid of things like your earned value, your network diagrams. Let's be honest, look at it for yourself. Creating a high-performing team, keeping your team on track, that's chapter 9, right? Doing the work, that's integration, that's direct and managed project work. Keeping the business in mind, you could talk about that at the beginning, pre-charter. So there's not enough.
That should be the first thing. That should be the very first thing.
Shouldn't it be? You mentioned that last time, Susan, that keeping the business in mind first, because we're talking about the benefits management plan, business value, the product backlog, and things such as that. So the way it's arranged is done with very little thought. It's very disheartening. So I don't know, going back to what Mark said, as far as, I don't know whether I'm going to jump in and do this thing with the new exam. I don't know what's going to happen when the 7th edition comes out, because it's so badly put together. But let's really quickly, we're not going to go into the details. I'll put some links in the chat. But when we see projects that have failed, such as the Hopeless Phone, these folks wanted to come out with too expensive to manage, the Denver airport baggage system that was a fail, just a nightmare for them. The first Panama Canal project failure, talking about HP as well, how companies just let opportunities pass them by, which we think PMI is doing, in not harnessing the right stuff for this time. they're going to miss the boat and they're going to realize, oh, we blew it. It's going to be too late. But when we think about all of this, we as project professionals need to decide how to work our projects in companies. That's really what it's going to come down to. We cannot rely on what is published anymore in the so-called PMBOK guide, 7th edition forward, because it's a disaster. And I have a video titled Disaster Waiting to Happen. Just go search on Google. You'll find additional thoughts about this monumental disaster. We are not in favor of what they're doing, but we want you to make sense out of this through our discussions. Hopefully through what we've been talking about, you will make sense out of this. But before we go to our next point, I want to show you this outline that we know all too well, those of us who are in the industry training. And these are some of the enablers that Mark was talking about. If you take a look at the enablers in this document, my friends, you realize that they are all over the place and very poorly put together. Just like what Susan said in the last meeting, the business should come first, but instead, what do we have? Manage conflict. Where's the sense in that? Where's the sense in manage conflict, lead a team, when we have other things that could come before that, right? Build a team is something that should come before a lot of this. Collaborate with stakeholders, missing. Build shared understanding, missing, up front. So the way this is arranged is very poorly done, very poorly done. And when you take a look at the people piece, honestly, you can see chapter 9, resources, chapter 13, stakeholders and communications. But there's a lot of stuff that they've put in process. But look at the error in process, right? The errors in process are that this does not make coherent, logical sense. There's a lot of stuff on the tail end that they should have put right up front, like the integration of plans, right? Determine appropriate project methodology, number 13. How on earth could you put determine appropriate project methodology as number 13? And we could go on and
like
on.
Number 1.
Exactly. So I don't know what sense can we make out of this. Let me ask Susan and Mark to comment.
My secret hope, and I hope I don't regret saying this, but my secret hope is this is kind of like New Coke, and and after it's done not going well, then they come back with Coke Classic, and I'm looking forward to PMBOK Guide Classic, which hopefully will be streamlined. They'll get rid of some inputs and outputs, and that's, I don't know. I'm hoping. I'm not done. I'm not ready to retire yet, so I don't want to have to live with this for the next few decades that I work. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm a little bit concerned because although my company is not an REP, I've taught for REPs for years. So there's an impact to me. I've been teaching ACP more than PMP actually, because there's been more of a need for it and less people who can teach it. So I'm a little concerned what happens with that. As I said, I have 9 Agile certs. What I like about the ACP is it's not just Scrum. Most of the certs out there are just Scrum. And I know, Phil, you have 2 of them. You have the CSM and CSPO. And, so that's great. But the ACP gives you a view for all of Agile. And so when people say, well, we're not using Scrum, but I want to learn about Agile, I'm like, this is a good cert.
Yeah.
And then what do I say now? Like, I actually think to myself, all of my students, when they're done getting their degree, their next question is, which cert should I get? I don't know what to tell them.
Yeah.
I've already given advice to one person.
Yeah.
I'd wait about a month after this new exam comes out, get on LinkedIn, get on the groups, get on like Praizion. I hope I said that right, but get on your group and listen to what other people have to say before you jump in. And unless you have to get your cert in January, I would wait. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm saying it to be nice, because
Yeah, I would agree. I would say probably 2 months. I'd probably say January and February, or hopefully we start getting more feedback. But it's going to be hard to get feedback because they're controlling that. We don't. They're going to shut down the that official PMI REP LinkedIn website, and we used to get some pretty good information there. So only the ATPs now. So the people that have signed up into the secret fraternity are going to get that. So it's going to be hard to get good information. But we'll do the best that we can and hope that they come to their senses.
Yeah.
There is a new group of former REPs.
Yes.
Yes.
Mark, we are in that group.
Yeah, we're in that.
Yes.
We're in that group.
Yeah.
So there will be some of that. But to your point, Susan, I really gravitate towards what you said. And David, one of our viewers here says, is it possible that they'll shut this whole thing down and get to their right senses? Not in those colorful
Yes.
words, but I
That is a possibility. So Phil, again, I'm the old dude, but so I joined in 1995, and I think it's a year later, 2 years later, I think it's 97, a new CEO of PMI comes in, and he kind of just all by himself decides that that there's too many people becoming PMPs, and he's not happy about that. He thinks the certification is being diluted and not as valuable. And he basically tries all by himself to change what it is to be a PMP to be kind of like a PGMP today. That to be a PMP, you would have to have direct reports, not project managers, but you would have to have team members that were your direct reports. And the whole PMI community, the chapters, the people, they went nuts and rebelled and screamed and yelled so loudly that this guy resigned, or he might have been basically just fired, forced out. So maybe, there's enough unhappiness. They get so many complaints with students preparing to take this test who say, right now in my classes, and you guys tell me what you think, but with version 6, since we've been on version 6 since what, April of 2017, the test has changed to that. It was just a lot more material to get through in a 4-day class than it was with version 5.
True.
And version 5 was more than it was with version 4. And it became less and less pleasant, to be honest. There wasn't any time, it was a fire hose class. It's drinking from a fire hose. And that's what it was for version 6. And now you're adding 50, 60% more on top of that the students have to get their arms around. I'm not sure they're going to do that. They might say, I'm going to go do something else.
The other thing is that I think that PMI may have underestimated the value of the REP or any sort of registered, now it's going to be ATP. And the reason I say that is because a lot of my students, when they ask me, so these are university students at the graduate level, they ask me for next step. I give them recommendations of who to go to. I never say go to an REP. I often recommend REPs like Mark's company or other REPs I know. But if I said to them REP, they wouldn't even know what the heck that is.
Exactly.
They're going on my recommendation as a professional and as an instructor. And what they don't realize is how many people like myself, like Mark. I mean, Mark and I were teaching the class this week and people were like, we want to learn PMP. At no point did they say, Mark, are you an ATP? They don't even know what that means. The customers don't know what that certification means. And PMI is pretending that it matters so much. It actually doesn't matter to most students.
Thank you.
It only matters if I tell them, hey, make sure you use an REP.
Thank you.
Problem, Susan.
The pretend word. I mean, let's be honest. How can you say we have surveyed all of our customers and we've found out that they're really keen on people who have been through? That is just a load of baloney. It is so inaccurate and incorrect. And honestly, I challenge PMI, if they happen to watch this, let them give us the laundry list of people who are indeed engaged and participated in that survey, because you cannot just change the direction of millions of us. I mean, there are over 1 million PMPs, then over 1 million of other people affiliated with the PMI by membership and by other certifications. And you just want to steer the whole ship off the cliff, seriously, without consideration. It's very disheartening. And we've got another point here. Let's go to it. I chatted into the chat the links that Mark had referred to about the certain projects that have failed, just 2 of them. So though these moves by PMI don't fall into the scale of the Motorola Iridium project or the Panama Canal or the other ones that we shared, it's a half-baked project. And let's talk about violation number 4. They have violated communications. As Susan said, the PMI chapters, other RAPs, I mean, it's just like we're peons, they don't even care, and they're key stakeholders. So what do you folks have to say about this major violation
There
of
was no sender receiver loop, Phil, as you pointed. It was a one-way stream of communications. That now they say no, Mark, you're completely wrong. We took due diligence and we paid very, very close attention to what our key customers, key stakeholders were saying. And I'm with you, Phil. I don't buy it. I don't think the REPs would agree with that at all. And I don't think the chapters, the board members of the different chapters and people would agree with that.
Yeah, I think if anything, the national organization should be further supporting the chapters. I think I've all of my experience being on a board of directors. I feel like it's more support, more appreciation. Like you said, Phil, they're mostly volunteers. I mean, I know I volunteered, and when I was volunteering, I'd started my business at the same time. I want to say I was volunteering maybe 20 hours a week. That's not a joke. And I know Mark was a volunteer with the DC chapter, and 20 hours a week is probably at minimum what he was putting in. I mean,
if you're the president of the chapter, if you are running the professional development group,
yep.
You are putting in so kind of 3 or 4 key people. If you're the key finance person, you
Yep.
probably are putting in almost a full-time job
Yep.
as a volunteer. And also, like for our chapter, the DC chapter, we're the largest. We always say this, it doesn't mean anything, but we were the largest chapter in the world with 10,000 members. It's a big business. And we need, so for those top leadership positions, we need somebody with executive experience, somebody that's, managed and been at the C level at a corporation that knows what that is.
Yeah. So I feel like there should be more support and appreciation. And I feel like this is definitely not supporting and appreciating the chapters. And I've had some people tell me off the record, past presidents, that said they just don't care about the chapters. And it's not what you say, it's your actions. But right. It's both too, because they're not even saying anything. They're not saying thank you, and then having actions not match. They're not even saying thank you. So
honestly, PMI have a very bad stakeholder engagement approach. Very, very, it's pathetic. Think about this. I got a phone call yesterday. Unfortunately, I missed it. What was it? It was a student in a dilemma. Signed up for the PMP exam. They're waiting for the Pearson people to show up. No one in sight. Totally clueless as far as how am I going to take my exam? And unable to take the exam on the 31st. And they just casually send an email. Oh, well, you probably have to take the exam in January. Talk about a lackluster stakeholder engagement strategy.
I mean, that's a huge difference because they're now studying for a different exam. I mean, that's insane.
This poor student of mine was wondering, trying to make sense, and he sent a text and called and said, Phil, I don't know what to do. Now, tell me that student has an impression that PMI know what on earth they're doing and that they're engaged. They're not engaged with their stakeholders. They don't care. Actually, they're on vacation or holiday right now from the 18th of December. Away they went with very little hope of finding help when people like my student are trapped, unable to take the exam. The proctor didn't show up for an hour. And we've made a lot of complaints. And Mark, we talked about this last time, with over 500 million, $500 million in the bank, can't they just employ some people to be on standby to help their poor stakeholders make sense?
I mean, when I was doing government contracting, somebody had to be there the Friday after Thanksgiving and between Christmas and New Year's. Somebody had to be there. There was like a certain percentage of staff that have to be there on call. And I had a student the last time I taught PMP this summer. They had they emailed PMI, they called them, and nobody was responding. And my customer came back to me and said, Susan, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, what, you think I got some golden key to get in there? I was like, they don't care about me. So I called Mark. I said, hey, Mark, you got any points of contact? He goes, no, they don't care about me either. So we're just like, I can call, but I'm just like Joe Smith calling. Nobody cares. And that's not right. So the REPs or the ATPs should have a special customer service person there to help them, because that would be a value add. That would be something valuable. That hasn't existed as far as I've known in the last number of years. So
I think that too, the whole doggone COVID pandemic has exacerbated a lot of this too. It's like it's done with a lot of stuff. In previous years, there were they would have 2 global or 3 global Congress meetings, one here in the North America, one in Europe, EMEA, and then one in Asia. And those were great meetings. So the first 2-3 days before the Global Congress opened up was a leadership meeting. And it was very good to go. We would always send like 10, 15 of the board members to that. Some great presentations were done. They'd bring in some of those, celebrities type speakers, authors of books, and great presentations, great time meeting other board members and other chapters and kind of sharing best practices. And then the Global Congress meeting itself was a great time for PMI to get some of that grassroots feedback. And so the CEO, their top people would come from what we call GOC or global. They would come to that. So I think with COVID, they probably tried to do something virtually, but I don't think it had the same impact at all as being there in a face-to-face environment at all. Just it's like Susan. Actually, I know this too. I've got 7 grandchildren and a bunch in school, and my kids. I say, "Hey, how's this virtual class working?" They're learning. He said, no, they're not learning. We're trying to fill the gaps. They're bringing in tutors. My kids are bringing in tutors, doing other things, homeschooling and stuff to try to fill the gap. So it just had a huge negative effect on lots of things. And I wonder if we hadn't had COVID, if this whole half-baked program and project would have gone as far as it did.
Yeah, things really went downhill with COVID. First of all, there was a pilot exam they tried to do, and they just cut it short because of COVID. So a lot of people who were trying to take the pilot exam ended up taking the current exam as it is today. And then all of our comments on the 7th edition, they just went whoosh. They just seemed to just evaporate.
Yeah.
The last thing I got was, okay, we accept this, but not this. We accept this with exceptions. And then there was no talk of any additional draft. And here we are today. We still have not seen anything since early 2020. So it's
we saw what, Phil, it was only 30 pages or 40 pages. It was very skimpy. I really, I can't phrase this in a polite way, so I probably shouldn't even try, but I didn't like it, we'll say that. And I let them know, and I put that back, and they said something very terse to me. They just replied back, well, we considered your remarks and we're not going to move on with them. They're not accepted. Sorry. No further explanation on
Mark,
any.
what they forget is that we wield a lot of power. They claim to know servant leadership by putting this position. They got no clue. They got no clue, because if they knew servant leadership, they would know that even if we were looked at as peons, we have power. We can vote. So this is a clarion call to all project managers, PMPs, PGMPs, SPs, RMPs, ACPs, business analysts, whatever you are in the world of the PMI. When the 7th edition and all of these other changes begin to be unleashed, you can vote with your feet. You can vote with your wallet. You can vote with your way of working. So you got to do what is good for you. Honestly, I've spoken to a lot of my clients, those in government. They're like, what on earth are they thinking? And I've got clients, private clients, they're like, just act like you didn't even see the 7th edition, because we are certainly not throwing away hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars to go to a lackluster, senseless way of doing stuff. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. Like Susan said, how has electrical engineering changed over the past number of years? How has civil engineering changed? Right. I studied civil. I did a construction IT master's. Nothing has changed in those fields or domains. So for you to think that you can impose stuff on people, and just because you feel you're the 800-pound gorilla, you think you can shift everyone in a direction that doesn't make sense, except making money for yourself, it's not going to work. So we as PMs, we are very intelligent. We need to make up our minds what works for us, what works for our companies. And honestly, if the 7th edition is not worth the paper it's written on, don't buy it. Don't buy it.
So
Get the copy, read it, and just forget the bad dream and hope that it's new Coke, like Susan said.
So the CEO of a pretty big REP, much bigger than me anyway, that actually they're using my course materials and stuff. And the CEO said to me, he said they're going to have a huge problem in that, for Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100, they've got a lot of PMPs in their company who are now not going to be able to speak the same language as the new PMPs coming in 2021. They're not going to be happy with that. So the existing PMPs are going to ask somebody about critical path or something, about fundamental, how you get requirements and what's in a scope statement. And the new PMPs might not have a clue. And
I was actually thinking about, that. There was something, just preparing to come here, I was looking at the agenda and I was thinking to myself, what's most important about the PMP certification when I go to organizations is a common language, a common language for project management. So what's more important is people being on the same page, even than being on the right page, to be honest with you, is because if you can't communicate with other people, I mean, I've seen people who come into a company, they don't know anything about the company and how things are done, but they know the best practices of project management. They know the PMBOK guide, and they're able to go in and lead a project. The names that they call things, the risk register and the human resource management plan and the project charter. I mean, there's an organization may have those things, but not call them that. Well, how do you do that? How do you go in and manage a project if you're not calling these things the same name? So if that's lost in the 7th edition, and I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with it, but if that type of thing is lost, that's going to be a huge problem, because communication. And I wonder, like I said, I always look for opportunity. And in March, when everything was going crazy, I said to myself, I'm not going to allow this to be the destruction of my small business. I'm going to look for opportunity. Bad news is only bad if you allow yourself to be at the impact of it. You can always look for opportunity. You can always look for situations. And I'm looking at this. Is there an opportunity? Maybe great training organizations like yours, Phil, and like yours, Mark, and maybe we end up rising to the top because people see the value of just having the knowledge, the experience. That's more important than the branded name. I mean, I wore Guess jeans when in the 80s. Do I wear them now? No. So a name and a brand is only good for so much time,
True.
So I mean, the PMI is only going to be on, be able to use that name as long as it adds value. And I can tell you as a professor, if I don't think what they have to offer is valuable to my students, I'm not going to recommend them.
Yep.
And if you don't see it, you can be a dinosaur. If you don't recognize that what you're providing is not really serving your customers and providing value, and especially in today's world, you're gone in a heartbeat. Talk to Kodak.
Oh yeah.
There's so many companies, and sadly, unfortunately, IBM is a shadow today of what it was. HP is not at all what it was in the, not being politically correct here, but not at all the Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard, HP that I worked in, where it was an amazing place. I was lucky to work there.
GM.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's so many companies that are, like we said, Susan, in our class, it's make dust or eat dust, and you had better always, if you're standing still, you're falling behind, and if you're not, it's not just changing. So there's new Coke was a terrible idea. So change for change's sake, or not, not focusing on value and what your customers are, not listening to them and what they're really looking for is death.
I just want to let people know one more time that there's a really great book that you can get that my colleagues have published. It's Hybrid Project Management Using Agile with Traditional PM Methodologies to Succeed on Modern Projects. Honestly, in my mind, these are the thoughts that our friends at headquarters should have been having. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, why don't you just get the book so that you're ahead of the curve? Because a lot of this stuff that we're seeing in this ridiculously outlined content is not going to help you as much as a great publication like this. As a PM, boots on the ground, pragmatic PM, you want real stuff that can help you, not fluffy stuff, not feel good stuff. And honestly, the conclusion of what we've been talking about, the sum total is you've got to make up your mind for yourself, for your company. If you're a PMO lead, PMO director, you better be smart. You better not just follow PMI off the cliff. You know, I talked about the 1984 Apple advert. Don't be like IBM being, walked off the cliff. You want to make sure that you get your ducks in a row for your company, because when things don't work, who are they going to call? It's you, So
Yeah,
PMO directors.
PMI is not going to be in trouble because your company didn't work. They're not going to take the fall for that.
And
Yep.
one
So
other thing about
I'm an optimist. I hope. Right now I don't have a good answer for people. Like what's the other thing I should do? I would still recommend go for your PMI ACP. You've got to know Agile, even if you don't think your company is using it. There at some point they're going to need to use something like that. So I would recommend an Agile cert. That would be something that's good to focus on right now. But in the meantime, we just got to kind of see what happens. And if PMI misses the mark, it's going to be a huge opportunity for somebody to step in there and make a new standard.
Absolutely.
So if you do it, Phil, I'll be on board with you.
Well, I think you've already set some of the foundation with this awesome publication that you've come out with. And to be quite honest, that publication will be very helpful for people who are honest and realistic and looking at the world in a real sense, not with rose-tinted glasses like I think the PMI are doing. And I think the PMI are blind with greed. Let's be honest. I think they're blind with greed. And I think they're chasing what is the next big thing that will sustain our wallets. Because I see the acquisition of Discipline Agile and many other errors they've made in the past, like disbanding the OPM3. And these are things that don't seem to sustain our interest as stakeholders. It just seems to be for their own selfish interests, like their wallet. And I'm wondering, why do they need so much revenue when we're not seeing them doing greater things? This is not a great move at all. And with 500 million in the bank, I don't understand their logic. It's meant to be a nonprofit, Mark, right?
Yeah, and Phil, kind of right in track with what you were saying. It smacks to me of white ivory tower work. Academics in a white ivory tower just spinning out stuff and not connected to the real world.
Yeah.
I would like to see them doing more things like the DC chapter does the Project Management Day of Service. I would like the national organization to be doing more of that. I would like them to be helping people find jobs, helping small businesses. I mean, small businesses, believe me, I'm a small business. I think all the three of us are small businesses. I think we are hugely underappreciated and underhelped. If you add all the small businesses in the country together, we represent something much larger than any large business. We just don't have a way to operate like that. But I would love to see PMI helping more of that, helping individuals who are unemployed to be employed. I think that those would be good things to spend their money on, especially as a nonprofit. I know they do have the project management. I think it's an educational foundation. That's part of the nonprofit. Right. I like that. I've donated to it.
Right.
Let's see more of that. Let's see people who are passionate about project management. We're passionate about project management. I want the professional organization that's a non-for-profit to have that passion for the people, for the knowledge. And I feel like this came from a business strategic perspective without stakeholder value recognition, which to me is the opposite of what they're preaching. It makes no sense.
We used to have that in kind of the good days our chapter was smaller. We probably today, or there's a time when we'd have like 400 people would come to a dinner meeting, but at the time when it was like 100, 150, then we could do a lot more things. And we would invite companies to come up to the podium at kind of the business section of the meeting where we were doing business announcements. We'd invite a company to come up and announce opportunities. And then they said, we'll stick around after the dinner meeting. And we had them put a little flag on their tables so people could find them easily. And then we also had pass the mic time. And so somebody would go around with a mic, and anybody looking for a job had like 30 seconds, 45 seconds to do their elevator speech and, kind of describe their experience. And then we connected these people after the meeting, and a lot of people actually did get jobs
Yep.
with this technique.
Wow.
I remember that well because I've been part of some of those meetings, and then also stickers. They did stickers years later,
Yes.
looking for
Yeah.
a job or I have a job.
Right.
It's amazing because I find there's people looking for jobs, and then I know people all the time. We can't find any good people. I'm like, how is this possible? So actually, I tell recruiters, go to the PMI chapter meeting, pay the
Right.
fee, just
Right.
show up at the networking hour. You'll have all these really amazing people. But it's a funny thing because people who are looking for good employees can't find them, and people who are looking for good jobs can't find them. And so I've actually in my existence tried to connect those people. And if as an instructor, you more often than not have people who are in between things because they're
Yeah.
like, I need a PMP cert or I need another cert because I'm in between things. And so they ask me, do you know of anything? And I tell them, go to a PMI chapter meeting. And I want to still be able to tell people that. Some of my students, they want project management experience, but they don't have it. How do they get it? And I say, volunteer. Somebody asked in the chat box, hey, I wanted to volunteer in my local chapter, but they didn't really have anything. I said, call another chapter. One of my students is helping a chapter in South Africa where she's originally from, where her family, nationality is from. And she's actually helping them, but she lives here in the States, and it's like a dream come true.
Wow.
And all I said to her is like, well, go call them. And she goes, really? And I go, I rarely find that people turn down volunteers, even if they're virtual. There's always something to do. So,
Right.
so, if your dream is to go live in Hawaii one day, call the Hawaii chapter and ask them if they have a volunteer opportunity.
Right. And that is one of the awesome things about PMI. I say it's plug and play wherever you go in the world. A company affiliated with the double-decker buses in London, they said, oh, we want to learn about this PMBOK guide, common lexicon. I couldn't believe it because, I grew up on the buses that these people service. So I went in there and taught them PMBOK guide right there in the heart of London, a company I would never have thought were looking for a common lexicon. So there are many plug and play opportunities in your local chapters around you. You'll be amazed. And I think that is what PMI should be looking at. We got a chat in here. It says, does PMI still do PM for social goods? Do you know anything about that? That's from
Well,
Denise.
this education foundation that
The
Susan was
education.
talking about is one. The PMI Day of Service, where we just volunteered and go do projects. So yes, there was quite a bit of that.
Yeah, there's the PMDOS is something that they do in DC, and I think it's the PMEF Educational Foundation. If you Google it, you can look at what they do. Like I said, I've donated to them before, made contributions. They do stuff around the world.
Yeah.
And
The
that's the other
chapters
thing.
do a lot of that. So at the Grass Like we even had scholarships that we passed out. We were bigger, so we had more capability to do that type of stuff.
Yeah, that's nice. Like for somebody who wants to get a PMI cert but doesn't have the funds to do that, that's really awesome.
Well, thank you.
So that's what I want from my professional organization that's a non-for-profit.
Absolutely. And the question to jump on that, the non-for-profit, why did we do this? Because we're not seeing PMI acting the way we would like to see them behave as far as the officials, not the volunteers, not us, the credential holders, but the folks who make the judgment calls. So why did we do this? We did this to serve the community since PMI refuses to step up to the plate. Susan, Mark, and I decided to do so. We decided to have this sense-making session. And we hope that from our musings and going back and forth and sharing honest opinions, you are able to make sense of this change, because PMI, they just seem to make change on a whim, like the website, the horrendous logo that they came up with. I mean, I didn't see them on social media asking for people's opinion, having people be part of the process so that they can make sense. You see, the PMI have a lot of great stuff that they don't use. For example, their organizational change management approach, which I call the FPIMS approach, the formulate the change, the plan, the implement, the FPIMS in their standard. They don't follow it. If they did, they would have these sense-making sessions with us. We wouldn't have to have them for ourselves, but we've had to. So the conclusion from what we've been talking about for the past going to almost 2 hours now, and I appreciate your patience, is the conclusion, right? Let us watch, let us reassess. So come 2021, we will be back again. We will be back on another call similar to this to reassess where we are with this crazy change to the PMP exam, the so-called 7th edition, which they've loftily put up on Amazon as, being released in Q1, and it's just 250 pages. There's a lot of cause for concern about where the value, because there's value in the 756 pages that Susan held up. There's value in there. We need to make it leaner, but there's value, and they've gotten rid of so much value that it's concerning. So we got to come back in 2021. We're gonna find out where are we in an agile fashion, because we don't have all the answers today. But this is massive commitment from my colleagues to show up with me on the last day of the year. It just shows you how committed.
Wait a minute, Phil. Good riddance, 2020.
Hey, bye-bye.
So at this time, we want to very quickly take any questions that you have. We got a question here, and this is, do you think there will ever be another organization that will offer PM certification? And are any of you considering doing that? Of course we are. So the course that we are going to be having at Praizion, of course, we're going to have Mark and Susan as guest speakers, and they are involved in training various entities, government and private. So what do you want to say about that?
Well, there's 3 major PM certifications. There's probably, gosh, Susan, you counted them or you went to a website. How many Agile certifications are there today?
I believe there's like 254 or something like that, with over 40 certifying bodies.
Wow.
I think in the federal government in the US, there's over 30 PM certifications just for the federal government. Wow. The federal government here in the US is switching their focus away from the PMP to something called FAC PPM, which is only available to federal employees and stuff. So they're kind of changing directions.
Which is a little bit challenging, because contractors will be speaking a different way because they can't take those classes. So we're a little bit concerned about that. But as far as I understand them wanting to go to a standard for the federal government, but they need to have an access for contractors. So
for right now, they're still sticking that they want their contractors, so outside project managers, to have the PMP. So they pretty much standardized on that. But there's 3 major PM certifications. In Phil's neck of the woods in the UK, it's Prince 2. And they don't publish, as far as I know, Phil, their certification numbers, but we think that it's something about the same as the PMP numbers, of over 1 million, I think, certified Prince 2 people. And then also in Europe, I think it's more Austria and Germany, there is IPMA, so International Project Management Association. They kind of do things in an interesting way. They don't rely as much on a test as they do on kind of an interview process. I don't know a lot about it. I know that's also part of the PGMP, the Program Management Certification for PMI. There's an interview process. So IPMA kind of focuses more on that. Can you guys add on to that?
Yes, Mark, indeed. It's funny you said that, because we just got a chat on YouTube from one of our friends here, Lucky Happy, and says, what do you think about Prince 2? And you just said it, Mark. And there are about 1 million Prince 2 credential holders in the world, according to the last internet search I did. I just put that into the chat. So there are many options. Prince 2 is a methodology, whereas the PMBOK guide is meant to be a framework. But I see the Prince 2 certifications stepping up, because PMI are leaving open a very important position in industry where people, like Susan said, they need process. Don't diminish the importance of process. It's like trying to build a bridge with principles. Oh, we feel good about our customer. Let's build a bridge based on feel good principles. No.
Appreciate
Your
that. As an
sponsor's not going to
engineer,
be, you go tell your sponsor that, the people paying the bills, and they're going to say, what? Take a hike, buddy.
Oh, this is Susan. Thanks for chatting that in. Anyone who is interested in the ACP, I'll pass on the information to Susan. She trains that. I've had a few people asking in the past number of days. For those of you looking for the PMP in 2021, the truth is my company already trained this syllabus in our own way, not the 5 horrendous modules that we put up on the screen and with all the enablers just randomly thrown in, not by that. So if you are keen on 2021 PMP, you need to go to projectmanagementmasterclass.com and we will give you more information about how that's going to happen. But we're not keen on, following just 5 random modules that have been thrown together. No. And to Mark's point, there is going to be a lot of stuff that needs to be covered that cannot be covered in the typical 5-day fire hose type thing. So we are spreading it out by 8 weeks. And it's funny that Mark said, why don't you wait about 2 months before you know what is going to happen in the world of PMP? Because that's exactly what we've decided to do. We don't just want to jump in to a bottomless pit, a pit of nothingness, because we don't know. Mark, do you remember a time in 05 or 06 where a lot of people who failed the exam started getting messages back and saying, oh,
Yeah.
we made a mistake. We're sorry, you didn't fail.
Right. That was when they went to version 3.
Yes.
They went to version 3. Again, I think at that time, actually, with version 1, version 2, they even announced what the passing score was, and I think it was 82% or somewhere around that. And then they added a lot more in version 3, a lot more ITTO. It's just a lot more, and the failure rate jumped through the roof, and so stopped the test. They stopped the test for about like a period of 2-3 months. They shut it down and they said, we need to rethink everything. And you know what they ended up deciding? We'll just lower the passing score.
Yeah.
So lowered the passing score to 61%.
Yeah, 60.5, 61, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they stuck with that for another version or so until I think version 4 came out, or the test changed for version 4. And then they said, we can't say what the passing score is, but
yes,
from our vantage point, nothing, what you needed to be scoring on all the practice tests and stuff, it all seemed to be holding true and staying the same. So we pretty much said, we believe it's still 61% within a couple of percentage points, plus or minus.
Yes, that's very insightful, Mark, because that's exactly what it was. And a lot of people till today, they think they know the score. We're not sure. We know it's based on the Angoff cutoff technique idea of a sliding scale. But honestly, it becomes more and more discouraging, Mark and Susan, you know this. How do you tell a student, oh, we don't know the passing score? How do you tell them that? How?
Yeah, I don't know why they won't publicize it. I mean, I understand like wanting it to be not like like the CSM cert. I don't know a soul that hasn't passed it. No one. And I know people who are not even technical. Somebody who's in like leadership development, she took the CSM and she passed it. So that's fine. I think that the PMI cert, you've got experience and you have to have knowledge. I think that's great. That is actually, to me, a good cert. Requires an application with experience plus knowledge. That's great. And I get you don't want everyone to pass. It shouldn't be totally simple, but you shouldn't just be throwing questions in so people can get them wrong so they fail.
Yeah.
Like it should be with a point in mind. To me, an assessment should be meeting objectives, right?
The test was always very challenging. It's always had that reputation. When I took the test, there were 5 multiple choice answers. Wow. And it was very nasty. They had things like, again, 5 multiple choice, and they would say A and C, but not D. E E and A only or something. And so it
Yeah.
was, you really had to think hard about things before you answered it. But as your point is, why are you trying to trick me?
Yeah.
What is the point? Why make this subjective?
Mhm.
Why just, you can't really test, to me, you cannot test in that way emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's what we're really about. I'm sorry, but that's what very successful project managers are very, very good at. They've got very high, it's more emotional intelligence than it is IQ.
Yes.
For people like me who like math, sorry, Mark, it's not really about math. It's about what's the essence of emotional intelligence? What's the key thing?
Mark,
Communication.
you've hit the nail on the head. I had to go bring the big old PMBOK Guide 6th edition that's falling apart.
Looks like
But
you've read that a few times.
I've, I've had a few classes, a few, but I'd like to go to page 53, which anchors what Mark said. And if you read it, when you have this idea that Mark shared, it says, research shows, this is from the horse's mouth themselves, from PMI, research shows that successful project managers consistently and effectively use certain essential skills. Research reveals that the top 2%, the top two, that is right up there, the top 2% of project managers as designated by their bosses and team members distinguish themselves by demonstrating superior relationship and communication skills while displaying a positive attitude. If that is not EI, then I don't know
Yeah,
what is. And with
yeah.
that knowledge,
What's
all
what's
this,
the essence of that? I know I'm preaching to the choir, but Susan's heard me say this. What's the essence of good communication skills? And then I always add that technical people like me sometimes struggle at this, which Susan's kind of knocking me around for. What's the essence of good communication skills? Listening.
yes, that is true.
That's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Well, I think we need to help PMI find theirs, the ears, that
Yeah,
is.
they didn't do much listening in the past year and a half.
Oh
That's
dear. So for PMI who's watching, we love PMI. We want you to know we're holding you accountable. It's important that people like us hold you accountable so that you have your own rationalization as far as what is working for the so-called people you are meant to be serving. You are meant to be a servant leader. You're not acting like one. We want you to behave like a servant leader. We want you to disband this ridiculous 7th edition idea. No one has bought into this idea in the stream I created on YouTube on my personal channel. I've had about 82 people that said this is a great idea, and not one person has said, 82 people have said it's a great idea that I have to not look at the 7th edition. No one has said the 7th edition is a great idea. It should go ahead as exactly as is. No one has said that. So if PMI, and I know you watch my videos, so listen to what we're saying. We're not stupid.
yep.
We're not dumb. We love the PMI. We have a lot of skin in the game. Mark has been in the game for eons. A lot of you in the headquarters, a
Hey,
lot of
no,
them in headquarters, Mark, when you were taking your PMP exam, they were probably in grade school. So they need to listen when people like you speak. And with that, I'm going to ask
right.
Mark to share any final ideas
Yeah.
before we round up.
I agree completely. Do not disband or go back to the 10 knowledge areas. There's nothing wrong with the 10 knowledge areas. There is nothing wrong at all with the 5 process groups and how the process groups or processes and process groups are used in each phase or are used in each iteration. That is solid. That is sound. Go back to that. What you can get rid of, as Susan said, is the myriad ITTO that got stuffed into version 6 and actually started increasing in version 3 and keeps increasing. You don't need that. This is supposed to be a framework that supports projects in all industries, no matter how simple or complex, no matter what contract type. It's a framework that should be 100 pages, 200 pages, not almost 900 plus pages when you add in the Agile practice guide with that. So you can put it on a good extreme diet, but don't run away from that solid foundation. That was good stuff. And I'll shut up. Susan?
I would love to see, I think in the beginning of the Agile practice guide, they talk about how do you know which approach is best to use for a project. I'd love to see more emphasis on that. That's where people get kind of tied up. That's why Mark and I wrote the book about hybrid project management. Was what do I do if I want to use Agile, but I can't use it entirely? How do I kind of use some of it and make that all work? And those are the real questions people are having. And I know there's no boilerplate answer, but I would like to see PMI do more of that. And what Mark said, I'll reiterate, like, we don't need more bullets. I mean, I know people would sit there with these big charts and try to memorize everything, and that's not what's helpful. But we do need to have processes. Processes make sure that we're consistent in the way that we do things. When I was a young PM, the only way for me to be successful was to follow best practices. I didn't have empirical data from my own personal experience because I was young. Okay,
But
now
there's
I
no
have
one,
empirical data and I have the knowledge. But what I like to give to people is, let me give them the knowledge, because they may not have time to get 10 years of experience managing projects. So instead, if they just follow best practices, they'll be successful. You can be successful even if you're new to project management, if you follow best practices. That should be the focus of the PMBOK
right.
guide.
And one thing we say in our book strongly is that, yes, we need processes, but there's no one perfect process. So sorry, SAFe, sorry, disciplined Agile. You cannot put an algorithm on project management. It's not algorithmic, thank God, or we'd be replaced by AI and robots. And that's not going to happen, I don't think, anytime soon.
That is a splendid way to end this. You cannot put an algorithm on project management. Thank you very much, Mark. And I just want to type in here for people that are wondering how to get the book that we mentioned has been published by Mark and Susan. I put a link there on the Zoom call. I'm also going to put a link in the YouTube chat. And if you want to get that, go on down there. And if you want to get in touch with either of my colleagues or myself, you can use that on the screen to get in touch with Mark and Susan. The Horizon link there, get in touch with Mark. And if you want to get in touch with Praizion, with me, there is a link to our information there. And come 2021, we'll be having more of these sessions, sense-making sessions, because we can tell that these sessions are needed in industry. There's really no one doing what we have started doing as a team. And we want to encourage everyone in their own silos in companies, because like you said, many companies have scores of PMPs and they're wondering, what do we do? Well, you need to have your own sense-making sessions as well. And let us know if you start any of those and you want us to come speak. We'll be quite kind of interested in what you're doing and would like to come in as guests and help you make sense out of the nonsense that seems to be happening around us. But thank you all very much. I appreciate the questions that came in. For now, we're going to disconnect from our friends on YouTube and we're going to stop our recording on Zoom. So from all of us, thank you very much and have a lovely new year.
Great. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Susan.
Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.